All right, we're up and running. So the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit, bombshell, kinda. We'll see how it plays out. Could be really game changing for real estate as far as how commissions are paid. So I'm going to share my screen and play this video. It's about 11 and a half minutes long. We'll watch it and then we'll discuss after that. Okay.
Perfect.
Bombshell lawsuit. It's been looming over our industry like a gray cloud since 2018.
Something big's happening in the residential real estate space.
We will no longer have sellers paying buyer's agents in the next 5 years.
There is a National Association of Realtors can rule that every seller has to pay out 2.5% or 3%. Class action is a scary word.
Imagine you're a middle-class couple. Your home is your biggest asset and you're ready to sell it.
Can you guys see the video?
It's not moving.
No, it's like frozen.
I mean, I just paused it to ask you, but it hasn't been at all.
No, it's been frozen since a while.
Okay, hold
And
on.
mine
Yeah,
is
it's
the,
stuck on
I
this
can't
big
really
white
hear it
building.
either.
What'd you say, Charles?
It was just stuck on a big white building for a while, and now it says home for sale.
Okay, let me, I had maximized the screen, but I'm gonna just play it like this and hope, was it working at the very beginning?
Sound was in and out.
All right, well, let's see if this works.
You find a buyer, but that buyer has an agent. The buyer's agent negotiates against you. Then they get you to drop the price of your home by $10,000. And even though they've worked for the buyer and they've worked against you, you have to pay their commission. How would you feel? This is exactly what happened to Joshua Sitzer and Amy Winger in Kansas City, Missouri. They sued. They sued the National Association of Realtors, and they sued some of the biggest brokerages in America. This case raises some big questions for US real estate. Why does Inman call this a bombshell lawsuit for real estate commissions? How is this lawsuit different from Christopher Morel's bombshell lawsuit? And what will happen if the NAR loses? Will buyer agents have to pay back the commissions to home sellers? Will real estate agents become obsolete?
This video is brought to you by Hoseo, America's most advanced home buying and selling platform. Americans across the nation are saving on commissions with Hoseo.com. You can too. Check out Hoseo.com on the web or the Hoseo mobile app.
On the 14th of November 2017, Joshua Sitzer and Amy Winger sold their Kansas City home. Their home was listed on Heartland MLS. Their buyer had an agent. Sitzer and Winger paid that buyer agent a 3% commission from their sale. Sitzer and Winger paid the buyer broker, even though that the broker represented their buyer's interest and worked against them. I couldn't fully confirm the numbers, but it seems that the agent negotiated the price down by $10,000. Sitzer and Winger still had to pay that buyer's agent a commission of $17,700. Sitzer and Winger did not like this. Oh, God, please, no, no! They felt like they were being forced to pay the buyer broker commission because of a National Association of Realtors rule. Sitzer calls this the adversary commission rule.
Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Isn't that right? Yes.
On April 29th, 2019, Sitzer and Winger sued the National Association of Realtors, America's largest trade association. And they sued some of the biggest brokerages in America: Realogy, Home Services of America, Remax, and Keller Williams. The lawsuit also names 4 MLSs and the brokers who own and operate these MLSs as co-conspirators. These are Heartland MLS, Mid-America Regional, or the Maris MLS, Southern Missouri Regional MLS, and the Columbia Board of Realtors MLS. And it's a class action lawsuit. The class consists of all similar home sellers who sold their properties and paid a commission since April 29th, 2015, and continue to do so. The NAR and the corporate defendants have attorneys who have strong expertise in defending trade associations, all the way up to the Missouri Supreme Court. The plaintiffs are being represented by 3 different law firms, all of whom have a record for settling multi-million-dollar class action lawsuits. 9 new plaintiffs joined the Burnett lawsuit. Joshua Sitzer and Amy Winger's lawsuit has gone through 3 major amendments. For reasons not publicly known, Joshua Sitzer and Amy Winger dropped out of the lawsuit they had started, but 9 new plaintiffs joined the lawsuit. Scott and Rhonda Burnett from Kansas City, Ryan Hendrickson from Belleville, Gerard Breet from Indianapolis, Scott Trupiano of St. Louis, Jeremy Keel from Kansas City, Shelley Dreyer from Carl Junction, Holly Ellis from Ozark, Francis Harvey from Columbia. Honorable Justice Stephen Bow. The judge in this case is Justice Stephen Bow. Justice Bow graduated from the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law in 1997. He went on to work at multiple law firms before opening his private practice in 2006. President Barack Obama nominated Justice Bow in 2015 to serve as a district judge for the United States District Court for the Western District of Missouri. The Adversary Commission Rule. The Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit revolves around the Adversary Commission Rule. NAR adopted this rule in 1996. The Adversary Commission Rule requires the listing broker to offer a blanket unilateral commission to buyer agents. The rule goes on to say that making such an offer is necessary. The rule states that MLSs shall not publish listings that do not include an offer of compensation expressed as a percentage of the gross selling price or as a definite dollar amount. This effectively requires the sellers to offer compensation to the buyer agents to get listed on the MLS. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Adversary Commission Rule is a potentially illegal tying arrangement under the Sherman Antitrust Act that keeps buying agents paid, though they offer almost no useful services. Adversary Commission Rule plus rebate bans equals no price competition. The lawsuit points out that both Kansas and Missouri have laws that prohibit buyer brokers from offering rebates to home buyers. The U.S. Department of Justice notes that such laws further eliminate any competition between the buyer brokers. According to the Consumer Federation of America, when an anti-rebate law is combined with the coupling of listing and buyer brokerage commission rates, as required by the Adversary Commission Rule, there's just really no hope for effective price competition on the buyer's side. Buyer brokers steer buyers away from low commission listings. The lawsuit further accuses NAR and the corporate defendants of incentivizing buyer brokers to steer buyers away from low commission listing. NAR's response. On August 5th, 2019, the NAR and corporate defendants filed a motion to dismiss the Sitzer-Burnett class action lawsuit. NAR claimed the defendants were explicitly permitted by the U.S. Department of Justice to limit membership in an MLS to persons who make offers of cooperation and compensation to other members of the MLS. That's when the DOJ intervened. The DOJ stated that NAR inaccurately portrays the DOJ's terms and that the NAR's policies at that time were not subjected to antitrust scrutiny. On October 16th, 2019, Judge Bow denied NAR's motion to dismiss. He stated that the
Sounds out.
and the co-conspirators knew of, complied with, participated in, and benefited from the Adversary Commission Rule. On April 25th, 2022, Justice Stephen Bow granted the class action certificate to the Burnett case. On May 20th, 2022, NAR filed a response to the class action lawsuit.
Look at these readings.
In their reply, NAR denied most of the allegations made by the plaintiffs, stating that there is no conspiracy, as alleged, and that NAR policies are pro-competitive. How is the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit different from Morell's bombshell lawsuit against the NAR? The Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit is very similar to the Morell lawsuit. Both lawsuits are class action lawsuits with multiple named plaintiffs. There are 9 named plaintiffs in Sitzer-Burnett and 8 in Morell's. The classes of similar sellers from April 29th, 2015 in Sitzer Burnett and March 6th, 2015 in Morell's lawsuit. Both lawsuits named the NAR, Realogy, Home Services of America, Remax, and Keller Williams as defendants. Both lawsuits challenged the implementation and enforcement of the Adversary Commission Rule. Morell just calls it the Buyer Broker Commission Rule. Here's where the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit differs from the Morell lawsuit. Jurisdiction. Sitzer Burnett lawsuit covers only 4 MLSs across 2 states, Kansas and Missouri. Morell's lawsuit has plaintiffs joining from all over the nation, 20 MLSs across 15 states. Damages. The estimated potential damages in the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit are $16.2 billion. That's huge, but the potential damages in Morell's lawsuit are a staggering $54 billion.
It's not just big, it's huge.
Class action certification. The Sitzer Burnett lawsuit has already received class action certification. Morell has not received class action certification yet. What would happen if NAR loses? If NAR loses, the potential damages could be huge. Assuming an average sale price of homes in Kansas and Missouri of $200,000, a 3% buyer broker commission, and about 900,000 homes sold since 2015, the damages could be $5.4 billion. Under Missouri antitrust law, the court can award treble damages. That puts the figure at an eye-popping $16.2 billion. Home buyers will have to pay the buyer agent's commission. Most buyer agents could be rendered obsolete. Remember, more than 90% of buyers start their search online. Why can't they complete the entire transaction online? Shares of real estate giants like EXP, Remax, and Realogy will nosedive. But most importantly, if the NAR loses here, it would set a legal precedent for all future cases. That would open up floodgates for sellers to sue the NAR and brokerages if they have ever paid a buyer agent commission. The hearing of the Sitzer Burnett v. NAR class action lawsuit is set to begin in February 2023. What do you think? Will Burnett win? Or will the NAR win? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe.
So that gave you, some background on the case. And, as it came to pass, the NAR lost the case. Now it's going to be appealed, of course, but other lawsuits are already being filed. So I wanted to, before we have our discussion, I wanted to share Brandon's response to it. I don't know if you guys watched his response on social media, and then let's have a discussion about it. So really quickly, I'm going to do that. His isn't quite as long.
Well, there's a lot of conversation.
Give me a second.
Online in and outside of the real estate industry about the future of buyer agents in real estate transactions and the profession. Will they disappear? Will they shrink by great numbers? The reason for that conversation is because a week ago today in Kansas City, the jury in the Sitzer Burnett trial found that the National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, several other firms and brokerages conspired to elevate and inflate fees towards sellers, ultimately resulting in higher commissions. Part of their argument was forcing sellers to pay a buyer agent commission on the other side of the transaction. I'll give you my opinion at the end of the video on the future of buyer agents, but I wanted to bring 2 things to the forefront for you. Number one, commissions are not fixed. They're always negotiable. So if you ever hire a buyer agent out of pocket or a seller agent to represent you, they're lying if they tell you that you don't have the ability to negotiate. Negotiation is a two-way street. It always is. At the same time, the agent has the ability to negotiate just as well as the client. So agents do not have to use do not have to list your home for a flat fee or a commission that they are not comfortable with, and many don't. When they get to a certain point in their career, they're only willing to flex a little bit or not at all based on their experience, their savvy, their track record. The negotiation is always a two-way street. Commissions are not set in stone. Number two, you don't have to use an agent. There is no federal or local law requiring you to use a real estate professional for any transaction whatsoever. In 2022, 10% of real estate transactions in the United States were for sale by owner, or FSBO, where an agent did not represent the seller. At the same time, for sale by owner transactions typically sell for 10 to 12% less than homes that are actively marketed by a competent, experienced listing agent or real estate professional. Most people choose to use professionals in real estate just like they choose to use professionals in any other field, like an attorney or a dentist. When my wife and I were younger, we used TurboTax online, and one year I got a tax credit I shouldn't have gotten. 6 years later, we got audited. It cost me a small fortune, a lot of stress and time. So I'll never not hire a CPA to manage my taxes again. That is the reason most people hire a seasoned, experienced, educated professional to walk them through a challenging, stressful, and expensive process. They want someone that represents their best interest and is a true fiduciary to them. That's what you get when you hire a seasoned and experienced professional, not someone that got their license 10 minutes ago that doesn't know what they're doing. I don't think you're going to see buyer agents go away for two reasons. Number one, we have the worst housing affordability that we've had in decades. And if you tack another fee onto buyers that are already stretched in this interest rate market, in this affordability climate, you're going to see a lot of people self-select and back out. And that's going to hurt sellers because sellers want competition for their homes so that they sell for more and don't sit there and die on the vine. Second, I think most people in a real estate transaction, again, 90% of transactions in the country last year had agents involved. They understand the value to having competent, seasoned, experienced professionals on both sides of the table. In almost every transaction I do, something comes up. There's a title issue, or there's an encroachment, or there's a lien that nobody was aware of, or there's a family member that has a claim to a future interest in the property that the seller didn't know about. Competent professionals help solve these problems, and their job is to land the plane. You always have one person that wants to buy, or one party rather, and another party that wants to sell. Good, seasoned, experienced agents help people accomplish that goal, and there's nothing wrong with being compensated for that. If you have any real estate questions or concerns, I'm happy to help you at any time. You can shoot me a message or reach out to me.
Yeah, we don't need the advertisement, Brandon. We got it. Anyways, what do you think? What are your first thoughts on that?
Bad news, and disappointed with Denard that they didn't defend it better. Honestly.
I mean, I think that's a legitimate response. Anybody else? Charles, I know you got an opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, so history always repeats itself. Okay. Did you all know that buyer agency didn't exist up until the early 90s?
That's when they implemented that thing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So buyer agency did not exist until the early 90s. And it came about because for the longest time in real estate, there were no buyer agents. It was just a listing agent. So when you would look at a house, you would go and you would deal with the listing agent. And that was it. Over time, they created the buyer agent in order to make it so then buyers would have somebody advocating on their behalf. I actually have some old family records from back when they used to charge 8 and 10% for the listing agent to list a house. So what I think is going to happen from this lawsuit, first off, it has to be appealed, right? Nothing will change until an appeal occurs. Secondly, unfortunately, we live in a society where things become very knee-jerk and people instantaneously react and say, oh, the sky is falling, everything's going to change. It's the Chicken Little of the world. I really don't think anything is going to change here for this foreseeable future. Maybe a year down the road or after this appeal comes out, we might see some changes. If the result of those changes is that buyer agents and buyer agency goes away, what I think will end up happening is the pendulum will swing that direction, right? And the people on the news and all that will say this is a huge victory for people because now they don't have to pay a buyer agent, right? But then you're going to start to see where it's the listing agent is only there to represent the seller and the seller's interest, and that's it. It will take some time, but you'll start to see scenarios where people are going to look for a home and they have no one advocating on their behalf. They're going to buy a home. They're going to be told one thing, and they might buy, the result of it might be another. And then the lawsuits will come from that. And then the pendulum, I think, will swing back the other way where people go, wow, why did we get rid of this? We need somebody to advocate for both sides. Could that be the one scenario that plays out? Maybe. But I don't think anything changes until any type of an appeal happens. It's interesting what occurred. I think from a higher level, the issues people have stems from the fact that agents do a very poor job of explaining how buyer agency works, how listing agreements work. I think as a whole, the industry has done a bad job of explaining that to people. And I think we can all agree, especially anybody who's been doing this for a while, we run into folks that they just don't understand because nobody's taken the time to explain it to them. I think we do a very good job at the firm of doing that, of taking the time, especially with listings and with buyers, to explain, look, this is what my fee is, right? It is negotiable, but this is what my fee is going to be. And as long as we continue to do that, it will be beneficial. But I think the industry as a whole has failed in doing that. And I know that's a little bit farther off the topic of where this is going, but I think right now the short answer is nothing is going to change.
I tend to agree. I think you're spot on with your assessment, especially to the knee-jerk point, but also the pendulum going the other way. I mean, the whole reason theoretically that buyer agents came about was because nobody was looking out for their best interests. It's the same reason why we don't do dual agency, because it's a conflict of interest. The whole point of the buyer agent was to get rid of the conflict of interest. The one thing that's funny to me about that video or that example is where they talk about the price was reduced $10,000. But they still had to pay a commission. Well, they would have had to pay a higher commission if it had sold for higher. And you know what percentages are when you sign the agreement. So it's frustrating. And I think to Charles's point, it all comes down to explaining and setting the expectations. And that's why during our buyer strategy session and the seller strategy session too, we go over the percentages, right? And the listing fee and the buyer agency fee, right? That's why it's explained in there what our rate is and that it's the buyer's responsibility to make that up if that's not being offered by the listing broker. Correct? You guys follow me? And, to Brandon's point, it is negotiable. We've negotiated several times. I think that, I don't know what NAR was doing here. I don't know how they fumbled this.
It looks really bad. Like they totally fumbled it. Like in that video, he even said like buyer agency, what do? They don't do anything really. And
that's completely false.
I know why how can they even allow that video to be out there without fighting it and not have their own video like explaining? I mean, it looks like they really dropped the ball. And also, like in that lawsuit, it says you have to list the compensation here. It didn't say you have to have a positive amount. It could have been 0 and 0. You just had to list it. It just has to be listed.
Previously, it could not be 0. Now it can be 0.
So that's again. So that it should be nullified because you could put no value. It doesn't say you have to put a value. You could put 0.
Well, yeah.
But why didn't they argue that point?
That video explaining what the lawsuit was before the ruling came out, and they changed it to where you could change it to 0. But now you can list $1, or whatever. If you're representing someone. I personally don't think it's going to happen because I think buyers are going to want their own representation. And I think a good listing broker will be able to explain that value, right? And the difference it makes. You know,
I think a really good way to relate this is what we saw about 2 or 3 years ago with the rise of the iBuyers. Okay. With the quote unquote discount iBuyers that would come in and list a property and, offer 1% to a buyer agent. And at that point in time, there were conversations all over, and I'm sure some of us had them as well. And people were saying, well, the iBuyers are going to take over. The Zillows of the world and the Open Doors of the world are going to take over, and there's going to be no more agents. Well, how'd that work out?
where are
We
the
saw
iBuyers now?
Yeah, they're gone. They came in, they offered a discount for a discount service, basically, and they're no longer here. They weren't professional, and they ended up going away. I think the long-term result of this will depend on whether or not how the appeal goes, which I think would be interesting to watch and see. But yeah, I don't think anything changes on it. I think again, it goes back to we need to continue to work on honing our skills, making sure we explain to people what it is going on, what the costs are, why the costs are this. And folks need to understand everything is negotiable. Right? It always is. The purchase price of a home, closing costs, everything is always negotiable. And I think, to Mark's point and to your point, Doug, the NAR, they just completely fumbled it. I don't know. And as a side note, how many billions did they say it would be? Up to $16 billion would be
For
awarded?
the case in Missouri and Kansas, with the additional damages could be almost 6 billion, but that nationwide one that hasn't gotten class action lawsuit status yet was like 64.
So I have a really interesting question, and I know we're not going to answer it today, but out of that $16 billion potential, how much of it do the attorneys get?
Exactly.
What is
I
their
want somebody to, when are we going to find the lawyer with enough guts to bring a lawsuit against lawyer fees?
Right. Are they getting, how much do they get of that? 30, 40%? I mean, I know the attorneys in this case argued that 6% is an egregious amount for providing a service. Well, if I was the attorney on the other end, I would have gone, well, how much do you get for providing your service? Are you taking 30%?
That's right. Is that negotiable? No.
Yeah. To me, that's egregious. You're going to take 30% if you win. I mean, with real estate, if we get the home, in some cases it's 3%, but 30% somehow isn't egregious. I think that's a sidebar item to somebody should have asked, but they didn't.
I hope that will be part of the appeal argument 100%. And if that's not, then they might as well shut NAR down because
yeah. I think we should send in a letter to them with suggested defense items at this point.
To kind of circle back though on reality though, and not just the hypothetical, I think one thing that you'll probably see if people aren't offering a buyer agent commission and buyers know that they're going to be paying for it out of pocket is that they're going to negotiate. They're going to ask for closing costs from the seller as a credit at closing, which will then go to their buyer agent so they don't have to pay for it out of pocket. Because again,
or we'll use the compensation agreement form with an offer, which already is an existing form here in North Carolina. If a agent went ahead and they listed a property and they only said there was, let's say, 1% compensation, when an offer is sent, you can send in the compensation agreement form that says, I'm not getting 1%, I want 3% or 2.5%. We already have these tools in place.
And you've done that with new construction, haven't you?
I have, and I've been successful with it multiple times.
So, I think it was important to set a foundation for this discussion and for everybody to kind of have an idea of the background on it. But also, and to understand what could happen, but also understand what could not happen. And that this doesn't mean that real estate is over. Okay. People are still going to want people to help them. People are still going to want their own representation. People are not going to buy a house online. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. I mean, maybe 5%. It's going to be low, just like the iBuyer thing. People are going to realize that they don't know what's happening, that they don't understand the process. They're going to be more pissed after the fact because of the advice and guidance they didn't get than what was paid for. And
My
this
husband
will
just said
affect
that
sellers.
my husband said he's gonna buy a house online and save 3% just to add to the conversation.
I'm gonna buy it on eBay. I do my real estate shopping on eBay where I buy my watches.
Maybe you can get a
Sorry.
package deal.
Comic relief, sorry, I had to.
All good. I appreciate, we need to have some laughter to this. It's either laugh or cry, right? Or somewhere in the middle anyways.
Yep.
I think it was a good discussion to have. Anybody else out there have anything they want to add or ask or anything?
Yeah,
Yes,
why
sir.
can't we, the NAR supposed to represent the realtors and protect you, would be for your interest, and they didn't do that. So can we now sue them to get the fees back?
You know what? That's a good question. I think that, and this is going on a completely different tangent, but I think it's time that the local MLSs take a really hard look at the necessity of tying the Association of Realtors with the MLS and making that a prerequisite for having access to the MLS.
Yeah, instead of focusing on how really important how to pronounce the name and to big up their, related sponsors, maybe they should work on those things instead. It's really,
I think that we can, everybody would agree that they failed on a monumental level. So we'll see what happens. Because as was stated, it's not over. There will be an appeals process. This stuff never happens quickly, but what will be interesting is how that plays out, and also the subsequent cases that I'm sure are being filed as we speak. So this could go to a higher level.
A really big thing to take away out of it is, this will come up in conversations, right? So as an agent, you need to be prepared to talk about it with folks. And really for us here at this firm, nothing changes except when people go, well, I heard that I don't have to, pay a buyer agent. I don't have to do this. It's like, well, look, it's always negotiable. Everything always has been. So here's what could have happened. If you don't want to offer a buyer agent compensation on the purchase of your home, here's what could end up occurring. Maybe you won't get as many showings, right? Maybe it could be that when they send an offer, they ask for compensation. So preparing folks for that and having that conversation and talking about it now will help us be more prepared and more successful when we have those conversations with listings or with buyers to make sure they're educated and informed about what's going on.
Yeah. And I think one thing that people also haven't taken into consideration is that, home prices become where they are because that's factored into the equation. Every time that 6% or 5.5% or 4% or whatever it is added into that, and that home sells for that amount, and then it happens again, that's part of the equation of building equity in a home because that's built into it. Like it or not, that's part of why prices are where they are, because that is factored in. Now, it's not upfront and not everybody sees it, but behind the scenes, that's definitely the case because people know, because people have a bottom line that they want to get to, and that upwardly affects what the list price is. Doesn't always affect the sales price, but it affects where it starts. So secondhand, it affects that. To Charles's point, it's all about explaining and showing the value of it. And just like the seller can negotiate, we can also say, that's fine if that's what you want. That's also not our policy, and that's not how we operate. I'm sure someone will list your house for a flat 2% and not pay a buyer agency. But the reason we do it is X, Y, and Z, because we know that's more effective and helps you get more for your home ultimately. Visibility is the big thing, right? The more eyes, all that. That's really all I've got. Anybody else have anything else to add?
Would we know about this appeal? And they went on all about this judge and said about him. I don't know what the point was that about, but is there any such, how can we follow the appeal and how do we know more about it?
Just pay attention to the news. It's going to be out there. It's going to be a big story because housing is a huge part of the economy. So people will be watching.
Do a Google alert.
And people like to hate on real estate agents, and some of it is well deserved. So you'll see it. You'll see it. Some people will be celebrating. Other people see the value. So just be prepared. And like Charles said, be prepared to have the conversation about it when it comes up, as it ultimately will. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. as always, we do this to have good discussions. I hope it was helpful. Mark, thanks for the questions. Charles, thanks for your all your thoughts and insight. Really appreciate it, buddy. Glad you could jump in. Everybody have a great weekend. I'm right here if you need me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.